I'm in the room and it's all men. A couple of guys sit down and say, honey, can you get me some coffee? And so I went and got them some coffee. How do you like it? Brought out all the coffee. Is there anything else I can get you? And then I got up in front and led the meeting. Such a power move. Like, you have no idea how stupid they felt. And I didn't have to do anything but do what they asked. I mean, they never forgot it. They've never felt worse. And they never treated me that way again.
Hi, I'm Hannah Bloking.
Hi, I'm Allison Macklick, and you are here with us with 403 for another episode of Imposter Talks. So today we have a very wonderful guest. Her name is Susan Tobes. Susan and I actually worked together on a joint venture for a customer. That's how we got to meet, I think last summer in Austin. And then we run into each other at conferences. I've been stalking you on LinkedIn because I love your content. And I said, you know what, Hannah, I think Susan in this new kind of life phase that you're in would be a really amazing point of view to come talk to all of us about imposter syndrome. So Susan, thank you so much for your time today. Tell us who you are, how you got to where you are, and let everyone know who you are a little bit.
Great. Sure. I've been working in the tech sector for about 35 years. I was either a customer or a seller. I've kind of gone inside and outside. I started into this career right out of UC Berkeley in 1985. I got the job at my college interview. You get interviews on campus. I got one and I took that job, and that's how I got into tech because my degree was in math. It wasn't in tech. And so it was just this sort of random entree into database architecture and design. And that's where I started. I started off as a solutions engineer, sales engineer, and did sales engineering at database companies and then Apple. I worked at Apple for many years. And then I found consulting, and I really, really loved and enjoyed consulting. And so I've kind of been in and out of consulting now for about 20 years. I did 15 in hard tech and then now more in consulting. And I've been bouncing around. I really mostly have been technical, and I switched into sales, like pure sales, carrying a number about 8 years ago. And I think I really found the thing, my love language, so to speak. I mean, I think sales is where I really should have probably been my whole life. I don't even know what my life would have been like if I had done it earlier, but I always had this chip on my shoulder that I'm blonde and I'm going to be technical, for God's sakes. That's what's going to happen. So that I probably should have always been in sales, and I've loved it ever since.
I love your background story so much. Allison and I are both learning from senior executives, especially females, how to introduce ourselves and credentialize. And that was just like a great example. You said something that was so interesting to me. I'm blonde and technical, and the topic we're here to talk about is imposter syndrome. So with that in mind, what does the term imposter syndrome mean to you? You could talk a little bit about your experience with it now and maybe what you faced traversing all these different roles in your career.
Well, early in my career, 35 years ago, I was often the only woman. You two probably also are of very few women in your leadership roles. And so I had to develop a pretty hard shell. I was pretty lucky. My mom was in tech, surprisingly, and she's 82. So she worked at Hewlett-Packard when I was growing up. And she used to have this concept of zipping up, like you had to put on a shell. You had to zip up your persona. Now they want you to be authentic. At the time, you had to zip that up, right? You couldn't be yourself. As, for example, most people never knew I was married or had children. And that was wise at the time. So have I experienced imposter syndrome? What do I think it is? What I always experienced is that being the only, when you're the only and you're saying something smart, there's this persistent need to second guess you. There was a game that was always played of stump the chump with me everywhere I went. I had to try extra hard to know everything because I knew the game was going to be played. And so the imposter part was that feeling of always needing to study harder, learn more, so that I was never confounded in front of anyone.
We've heard a lot from women and minorities, especially
Mhm,
about feeling like the only.
mhm,
And for all of us, right? We're still women in tech. It happens. I was on a call today with me and 9 men. And then,
mhm,
hello, everyone.
mhm.
It's pretty common. So, do you have an example of when you felt the only, but kind of
Mhm.
turned it and made it into something that worked for you? Like, kind of turned the tables and kind of used it as like a power or something to make you feel confident?
I learned early on that and I think I've flipped this script a little bit. So, like, probably for my first 20 years of working, I had to pretend it wasn't a thing. Like, you just had to pretend if they made comments or anything happened, you just didn't hear it and you just kept going. And I had to learn a lot of grace. I'll give you an example. I was working at Silicon Graphics in Silicon Valley in the 90s. I was a product manager at the time for Oracle database systems on the Silicon Graphics machines. And I went into this room, it was fairly new. I was leading the meeting, but people didn't know me. And so I'm in the room, I'm like laying down, this was back when we used paper, laying down paper and stuff. And it's all men. A couple of guys sit down and say, "Honey, can you get me some coffee?" And so I went and got them some coffee. "How do you like it?" Brought out all the coffee. "Is there anything else I can get you?" And then I got up in front and led the meeting. Such a power move. Like, you have no idea how stupid they felt. And I didn't have to do anything but do what they asked, which was probably that was like the toughest thing I could have ever done because I really just wanted to, you know, say something. But I mean, they never forgot it. They've never felt worse and they never treated me that way again. So I don't think I could ever repeat that. I love that story because it was like a shiny moment for me. Like I said, I don't even know how I did it, but it deflated. I mean,
I'm loving the story so much. And I actually think that there's like one resonating theme with what you've talked about. And that's the same essence of like zip it up.
yes, yes,
And it's true. And it's so hard in that moment to not want to like scream. And then you're just kind of like reacting exactly how they would expect you to react, you know?
right.
Thinking about our audience, a lot of early stage career people, people that are minorities in the groups that they work in, if they're feeling that imposter syndrome, if somebody says to them and they're getting ready to start a meeting, "Hey, sweetie, can you go get me coffee?" Like, what's your one piece of advice for them?
Well, I certainly wouldn't do it that way now. And I wouldn't recommend anyone do it that way now because that's just not okay. That behavior isn't okay, right? It never was okay, but now it's even more not okay. And so I do think having some grace in your response gets a better result. You can't always have it because your best day may not be the day that. So my response, and this continues to happen because I went to a meeting recently where everyone just assumed I was like taking notes. And I'm the VP of sales, I'm managing director. And I said, "Oh, I will be leading the meeting. Um, but if notes need to be taken, is that something you could do?" Right? Because it was someone else in the meeting and they didn't know me. And so I did it nicely, but I did not pretend. And but even on but that again, that was a decent day for me. But on my worst days, I'll just say, "Really?" You know, use a little humor and sarcasm. "Are you joking?" You know, like you have Wi-Fi, right? You have the internet. You could have Googled me. Did you see my pic? Seriously? Like, right? You didn't prep for this meeting, I guess. Right. So there's a whole bunch of things that you could say, but I think the young people today, you have to own it. You have to own your power and say, "I'm the one here to do this work. Feel free to ask me any questions related to that topic," and just own it.
I love that. One thing that we hear a lot is kind of like Hannah said at the beginning, how great you introduced yourself. Also, like practicing, not comebacks, but just like being prepared for situations like this because
Yeah.
it doesn't come natural, right? It's like
No,
something that we have
no.
to work on and perfect and get really good at it. So I love that you said that because we're going to experience that our whole career.
I still experience it. It's shocking that you still experience it. And people have worked very hard to become more subtle about it as well.
Mhm.
So the microaggressions that happen, it's really interesting that continues. But when it's right to your face, just like in any kind of sales situation, planning for the objection, plan for that objection, plan
Right.
for it, write it down, take a couple of notes. What am I going to say when they assume I'm the senior solutions engineer and I'm offering the suggestions? What are you going to say when you'd like to hear from a guy? You know, by the way, people still say that, right? I'd like to hear from the guy in the room.
So
Really?
that's my favorite takeaway from this conversation is plan for the objection. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the fact that you fear these things could happen, plan for it. It's going to
Yeah.
happen.
They're
Yeah.
going to happen. You just
Yeah.
don't know when it's going to happen. It might not happen today. And like I said, it might not happen on your best day, the day when you're like ready. So if you don't have it in your back pocket, my mom always used to say she'd give herself these like physical cues. And as we've all moved online, it's much easier to give yourself physical cues. But if you need to remind yourself to be your best self on a call, do some physical thing that reminds you. So like she would take off her watch and set it down next to her when she'd go into, and she founded companies, right? She's done all these amazing things and she would have to remind herself because you can't be your best self every day and know how to handle something. And to suggest that we all can be graceful every day, it's not going to happen. So there are going to be moments. And that's the other thing is forgive yourself when you have those moments where you just can't be your best self. You're like, seriously? Really? It's going to happen. Accept it.
I love it. This has been such a great conversation. I feel like we could talk to you and about experiences forever. I want to know more about what it was like working as a woman in tech in the 90s. That might be another follow-up conversation. But thank you. Thank you so much, Susan. This has been so wonderful. We're going to have so many great nuggets to pull out. We can't wait to share this with everybody. Hannah, do you want to close us out?
Yeah. Susan, it was such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Imposter Talks.
Subscribe, like, and review our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And please follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube at 4under3.
And we want to hear your imposter story. If you're interested in being a guest, please email us at info@4under3.io. Thanks so much.